If there is anyone who would like a translation device, we have them at the entrance to my left. And we do have one of our Spanish teachers from Marshall, Micaela. She's available also, correct?
Yes.
And is she here?
Yes, so
Hello.
so we have Ms. Connie Galvez here, if anyone needs translation or interpretation services.
Connie,
So-
can you come forward, please? Thank you. Everyone give Connie a round of applause. Yo soy la tercera generación nacido aquí en los Estados Unidos, so español is a little bit rusty for me. So I'm going to have Connie announce that if you need a translation device, that you can go to that table over there to get one. Thank you.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos. Si necesitan traducción, allá tenemos aparatos para que puedan escuchar la traducción en español. Gracias.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Cynthia Olivo. I'm the Vice President of Student Services here at Pasadena City College. And it's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to PCC. It also gives me a tremendous amount of pleasure to introduce to you our college president. And he's worked here, this is his third academic year. He is somebody who understands what it is to overcome a life of challenges. He grew up overseas in a country that, as he describes it, there was no running water. He understood what it was to be treated as though you don't belong. And it really, that empathy that he utilizes in his leadership, it's valued and it shows, and we're going to miss him. He's retiring at the end of this year. So please help me welcome and thank Dr. Verdian.
Thank you, Dr. Olivo. Buenas tardes and good evening, everybody. Welcome to Pasadena City College. It gives me great pleasure tonight to see all of you assembled here as we look at what we can do to improve the lot of our students that belong to ethnic minority groups. Remember that Pasadena City College is more and more being reflective of what the state is looking like and what the nation is looking like. We are a Hispanic-serving institution. Last year, we passed the 51% mark of our student population of Latino origin. It is therefore important that we do everything to better serve this population. As Dr. Olivo mentioned earlier on, I do understand what it means to be a minority student in a majority environment. At Pasadena City College, we have been working very hard, and we will continue working very hard to provide the support services that are so important for students to succeed. Under the able leadership of Dr. Olivo in the Student Services Division, we have increased counseling, we have increased tutoring, we have increased every kind of support that is necessary for a student to understand what college means. If you are a first-generation college student, if you come from a family where your parents don't even have a high school education, you do not know how to navigate the system. It is so important that we provide that type of leadership. When a student comes to campus for the first time, and by the time that student graduates from the college, that student will have been in contact with so many different areas of the college. All it takes is for one area of the college to give a negative feedback to that student, to turn that student off. And when that happens, the research that we have available shows that in about 65 to 70% of cases, those students go away and they never come back. Our goal here is to ensure that our staff, that our faculty understand that concept so that we create a welcoming environment for our students to feel that they are at home at Pasadena City College. We have done everything we can over the past 2 years to increase the training of our faculty in what diversity means. Our faculty, our staff have been exposed to that, so that when we go through hiring committees, we understand what diversity means, and we treat every application in exactly the same manner. Consequently, over the past 2 years, we have significantly increased the number of faculty belonging to diverse groups on our staff. We have significantly increased the members of various diverse groups in our administration, in our classified, and in various areas of the college. We want to create a college where our faculty and our staff are representative of the student body that we have at the college. And I do hope that the event we have tonight will provide an opportunity for everybody to better understand what diversity is and how we can better serve our students. Enjoy the evening. I will have to run to another event where the college is being honored by the AME Church at the 130th anniversary today. So I thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you. And now it gives me great pleasure to welcome Assemblyman Chris Holden to the podium. Mr. Holden is a friend of the college, is a friend of the community, and under his leadership, we have been able, at the state level, we have been able to promote the dual enrollment program, which has been a passion of his. And thanks to this, we will be able to have high school students take college classes and get a head start as they come to college. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Holden.
Well, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here, and certainly I want to say thank you to Dr. Verdin before he leaves for his leadership here at Pasadena City College, but actually beyond just the boundaries of this fine institution, your leadership has extended well into the entire district that PCC covers, and so we just want to say thank you for your commitment, thank you for your partnership, and we look forward, even if you are retiring, to be a resource to all of us as time goes forward. You're a great man for education. Thank you for all you've done. And good evening. And I'd like to say welcome for attending tonight's Status of Latinos in Higher Education. This is a community forum where we really wanted to bring the community together so that we could focus on the issues that are specific in terms of educating and removing barriers for Latinos in our community. This is an opportunity for us to really delve into issues and really be complete, transparent, and understand how the system is working and how it is not working and how we can do a better job. It's a pleasure to be here and to join with Campaign College for Opportunity for co-hosting this event with my office and for the dedication to educational excellence as we preview your report, The State of Higher Education in California Latino. We have several local organizations that have co-sponsored tonight's event, and I'd like to take an opportunity to thank them as well. They are Education Trust West, University of Laverne, University of California, Los Angeles, California State University, Los Angeles, the California State University Office of the Chancellor, and Pasadena Unified School District. I'd also like to acknowledge the Planning Committee. These events don't just happen on their own, and so I'd like to acknowledge the hard work and dedication of Dr. Cynthia Olivo, Dr. Michaela Mares Tamayo from Pasadena City College, Audrey Dow from the Campaign for College Opportunity, Maricela Cervantes from the California State University Chancellor's Office, Vanya De La Cuba, Field Representative for Councilmember Victor Gordo in Pasadena, Gilbert Barraza from the Pasadena Unified School District, former principal of Pasadena High School where I graduated, so I have to give you a special shout out. Daniel Lorera from University of Laverne, Stella Murga from Adelante Youth Alliance, and Jaime Zamora from UCLA. We are excited that thoughtful minds are collaborating and focusing on this important issue. Investing in our young people's minds is the wisest investment. There are a lot of interest in providing educational opportunities for creative young people so that they succeed in school as well as in life. I'm looking forward to a robust and honest dialogue. Thanks to the leadership of Campaign for College Opportunity and their interest in addressing this issue. We'll hear tonight highlights from the report's findings and identify best practices to consider in addressing disparities and inequities in access, opportunity, and achievement. We will feature a panel of leaders in our community who are working to address this issue. But first of all, I would like to invite up two students, Diana Castro, a sophomore at UCLA, and Sebastian Jordan, a senior at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, to share their experience in and regarding college access. So if I could have them come forward.
Good evening, everybody. How you doing? How you doing? So my name is Sebastian Jordan, and I'm a fourth-year civil engineering student at San Luis Obispo. First off, I'd just like to thank you guys for having me and letting me tell a part of my story. My story begins with my grandma, an illegal immigrant at the time, struggling to raise 10 children. At the age of 16, my mom had to drop out of high school in order to help support the household financially. And due to these financial hardships, she never had the availability to focus on her higher education. When the time came and she had children, she realized how important it was for me and my siblings to have an educational role model in our lives. So about the time I started high school, she also started the nursing program here at Pasadena City College. I would come back from school every day and see my mom coming back from work, working on her homework, just like me, right next to me at the same table. And this really pushed me to do what I could do and to the best that I could do it. Although my mom was receiving a higher education, she was not done with it when the time came to apply for four-year universities, and she was just as lost as I was. Although she was able to help me with my studies, she was not able to help me with this next step, and that is where the teachers and administration of my high school came in. I had wonderful teachers such as Mr. Michelson, Mr. Van Akron, and Dr. Verdi, who were able to push me to take education more seriously. When I thought I couldn't do it, they said, hey, instead of just taking this class, take that extra AP. Go for the A. Don't just settle for the B. And because of that, I can honestly say I am where I am today. When it came time for applications to universities, I was also lost, but thankfully I had the administration at my school to help me out. People like Mr. Barraza and Mr. Tran were able to help me out with my applications, with financial aid, and with other things that go along with that process. And thanks to those people, I was able to get my full tuition at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo covered. I'm happy to, when someone is accepted to a university, it is not just that student who is going to school, but their family, their friends, their neighbors, their teachers, their school, and their community. I know that every day at San Luis Obispo, I know that I couldn't be there without receiving help from absolutely everybody who had impacted me. And I bring them with me every day. It takes a village. Thank you for your time.
Hi everyone, my name is Diana Castro. I also went to Pasadena High School. I graduated class of 2016, and I'm currently an incoming sophomore neuroscience major at UCLA. I start school next Thursday, actually. I can attribute the majority of my success to my parents. My dad is actually here today, supporting me today. Hey, Dad. I am not a first-generation college student. My dad got his bachelor's in fine arts from CSUN, and my mom went to Glendale Community College and LA Trade Tech to learn more about her passion in fashion. From a very young age, as far as I can remember, both of my parents made sure I was comfortable in a library setting. We would always go to the library, whether it was like those family events where there's like storytelling or painting classes. We would always go when I was a child, and my dad actually takes community college courses in subjects that he's interested in. He's actually taking a computer programming course here, I believe. He's here, right? Yeah. So as I got older, we would go to the library very often, and we would both study together. Like, my dad would be working on his like language course studying, and I would be doing my stuff for school right next to him. So from a very young age, I learned to discipline myself and have good study skills. And in terms of how I prepared for college, I took 10 AP courses at PHS. I passed all the AP exams. I took human anatomy here, and I can say that was like the hardest class I'd ever taken up to that point. That class, I think, definitely prepared me for UCLA because it was summer session when I took it, so it's a lot shorter than the regular semester, and it's pretty crazy. Like, we would get like 100 slide PowerPoints, and we had weekly exams, and I remember on the very first day, the professor asked everyone to introduce themselves, and people were going around the room, and it was just like, hi, my name is Kathy, I'm a radiology major. My name is Ryan, I'm a nursing major. And then it came to me, and it was like, I'm Diana, and I'm in high school. And like, somebody clapped in the back of the room, and I was like, okay, that was unnecessary, but. So I felt like my peers kind of expected me not to do very well because I was 16 and, you know, unsure of life or whatever. But apart from the pressure I had for my family and myself to do well in the course, I wanted to prove my classmates wrong and that I could actually do well in the course. So my dad helped me study, you know. My parents were always helping me come up with new ways to study if something wasn't working. I ended up doing well in the course. But that's just community college experience. So in high school, I was very fortunate to have two amazing counselors, Mr. Tran and Ms. Linares, who I heard was going to be here today, but I don't see her. But both of them were very helpful in the process. I think the most stressful time in high school for me was senior year because I had to learn how to balance writing the college application essay as well as balancing all my courses. And I was so scared writing the essay, and fortunately I started a rough draft very early, and I was able to go to both of my counselors and ask for their feedback, and we prepared months in advance, and I was able to write a solid essay, and here I am today. Apart from that, I also had very receptive teachers that were willing to share some time with me and make sure I understood the material. For example, my AP biology teacher, Ms. Giacalone, we would have like weekly exams and stuff, and I guess the equivalent of office hours in college would be like advisory in high school, and she would let me come in during advisory and go over problems I'd missed on tests and ask her questions and take notes on what I'd missed. And with her help, I was able to do well in the AP exam. So all in all, I would like to thank all my teachers, my counselors, my parents for helping me become the person I am today. And yeah, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Diana and Sebastian. You do us proud. Certainly you are making your commitment to education, putting in the time, working hard, and you have a supportive family, and so congratulations to you. And we're looking for big things from both of you. And just know, as you hear from these professionals and see this community here, they're here to be supportive because it does take a village. And you are going to have to occupy these seats that we hold right at the moment. So we look forward to your continuing to grow in your educational experience, and we continue to learn from you and look forward to strengthening the process so that it's even better for the young people to follow. Now it's my opportunity and my pleasure to introduce our first presenter, Michelle Seguras, who is the Executive Director at the Campaign for College Opportunity. The Campaign for College Opportunity works to ensure all Californians have an equal opportunity to attend and succeed in college. Ms. Seguros will be providing some highlights and her vision for how we can utilize the report to address the problems it encompasses and hold educational leaders accountable. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Seguros.
Hi, everyone. How is everyone? Good. Good, thank you. We are just going to get set up really quick. Do I have full screen? Thank you, Assemblymember Holden, for inviting us to have this conversation. I think it's a good expression of the leadership that we need amongst our policymakers, and your passion and interest for education in particular, and higher education more specifically, is something we should all be proud of. I suspect that the Assemblymember may not share all the many ways that he has been focusing on higher education, or maybe he will later, but I'm going to do it for him because I think we need more strong leadership on this front. And just in the last year alone, his priorities, his legislative track record has really highlighted some of the key issues that we think are really important. How do we make sure that folks like Sebastian and Diana have an opportunity to go to college? He's introduced legislation to make sure that students understand how much money they're borrowing and how to use that effectively. He's made sure to introduce legislation to take care of foster youth so that the students that have the least access and preparation for college can actually get there. He's also addressed something that maybe many of us don't think of or take for granted, but how do we make transportation affordable for students? When we talk about free college for our neediest students in California, we have to remember that college isn't just about tuition and fees, it's about all the other costs that can become barriers for low-income students, and we're proud that you have really tackled all those issues, so thank you. Thank you for your leadership. So just a quick introduction to who we are as an organization. As the Assemblymember mentioned, our focus at the campaign is to make sure that more Californians can go to college, and that once they actually get there, once they walk through these doors here at PCC, that they complete, that they transfer or they graduate. And we care a lot about these issues, and I'll always say for two critical reasons. One, because like Sebastian and other students, I'm the first in my family to go to college. And so one of the things I'm most proud of, and my team loves to put this picture of me graduating from college up, is the fact that I did graduate from college. And I think for many of us in this room who did go to college and graduate, we know that it was life-changing. My mother only had a 6th grade education, worked mostly minimum wage jobs, and when I graduated from college, my first job out of college, I made more money than my parents' combined income alone. And for low-income students, that is what college does. It really is, I think, the promise that we call the American dream or the California dream. It's the reality that it doesn't matter where you start from, that we all have that opportunity and that chance to get there. And so that is what drives our passion for making sure that more students have that opportunity in California. But the second biggest driver is the reality that, that is what California needs. That all of us need to make sure that more students can go to college and graduate, because we live in a society that is better when we have a more educated workforce. So our focus at the campaign has really been about pushing greater college access, making sure that there's completion once students get here, that it's affordable, And just as importantly, and part of why we're having this conversation, is that we make sure that it is so for every single ethnic group in our state, that everybody truly does have the opportunity to reach their American dream and get an education. And unfortunately, I get to come up here and tell you how we're falling short. But I think fortunately, this conversation is completely centered on what we can do about it. And the panel conversation is about what are the strategies and how can we all advocate to make sure that we make things better for California. So I'm going to share some findings from research that we have done on the state of higher education. We do a series of these reports. We believe it's incredibly important to disaggregate the information by race and ethnicity, and so we do reports on Latinos, on Blacks, on Asian Americans, and our Asian American report is the only report of its kind that disaggregates data for Asian Americans beyond lumping them all together to really identify some of the challenges within some groups in that community. And so I'm going to be sharing with you how are we doing as a state with regards to Latinos going to college, being ready for college, completing college. So those are some of the data points that I'll share. I hope you don't all worry about taking furious notes. If you want a copy of the presentation, we're happy to share it with you. This is why this matters, and I say this to every crowd that I speak to. The donut is California's population. The orange is Latinos, who are the largest ethnic group in the state of California. If we break it down by numbers, there are more than 15 million Latinos in California. You see the proportional representation there in our state. So I always say, this issue of educational attainment isn't important just for Latinos. If you're a Californian, if you care about the future of our state, then you should also care about educational attainment for Latinos in California, regardless of whether you yourself are Latino. Just some other very, important facts to share. I like to point these two out because sometimes there's a lot of misperception about Latinos in our state and in our country. I want you all to understand and know that the majority, not just the majority, but almost, 96% of Latinos under 18 were born here. We're not talking about immigrants or undocumented folks. The majority of Latinos in California were born in this state. 1 out of every 2 person under 18 in the state is Latino. So if you go back to that chart where I just showed you the percentage of Latinos is 39%, right now, if we look at under 18, 50% are Latino. So all you have to do is, project out and assume that this part of the donut is going to continue to get bigger and bigger. And so there's work to do to improve outcomes. So I'm just going to share some of these data points with you. This chart shows you educational attainment. The one in the middle, I'm not sure if I have a pointer here. I do. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to stand. Can you hear me if I stand out here? Yes? Yes. If you can't hear me, I guess you wouldn't say yes, right? Okay. Let me know if I need to speak louder. I think I project okay. But here in the middle is Latino educational attainment. But you can see that we're actually showing it for every single group. The critique I have a lot of times when data is shown is that we show this bar right here. So if we look here, we see that 33% of adults in California have a bachelor's degree, 8% have an associate degree. The green is some college. This kind of grayish blue is a high school diploma, so you can see high school diploma across. doing okay, but I appreciate it. I don't have to yell. So, you know, this is why disaggregating data is so critical, because you can see here the huge variety, right? We have huge differences in educational attainment. Bachelor degree holders is the the darker orange here at the top. And this is where we are with no high school diploma at all, okay? And this is for folks over 25, so we're not counting folks under 25 in this chart. What you can see here is that for Black Californians, 32%, a third of them have some college but no degree. So that's an important point to understand, because the interventions for how we address that, how we get more Black Californians to get a college education, would be a critical piece here, right? And not so critical if we're talking about some of the other groups. For Latinos, you can see that bachelor degree attainment is ridiculously low. Only 13% of Latino Californians have a bachelor's degree. How many of you have a bachelor's degree? Raise your hand. So you are very much part of this 13%. In this room, it seems like 80%, but definitely not the norm and not what we have in the state. So you can see some huge challenges here. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about admissions, and here I'm going to go into real specific data and information. So again, I shared this blue bar is very important. Okay, it's not like, you know, when you, what's the game that you play where you go under the bar? Limbo. The limbo, yes. We do not want to do the limbo, but we are doing the limbo here. Because in every single place, in every category that we measure in terms of Latinos in higher education, we are under the bar, we are underrepresented. The bar would be, for us, equity. It would mean that if 18 to 24-year-olds are 50% of our population in California, then about 50% should be in each one of these categories, right? About 50% California community colleges students should be Latino. Right now, it's only 45%, so we're closest in the community college system. Many of you who work in community colleges or have attended know that that tends to be, if Latinos go on to college, they go to community college. 39% of Cal State students are Latino, 23% of UC students are Latino, and then these are private not-for-profit colleges like Stanford, USC, the Claremont colleges, 24%, and then these are private for-profit colleges. DeVry, ITT, some of those campuses, some of which have now been shut down because of bad practice. So what we have seen is that there's been a huge increase in college preparation and college going and applications. I won't read all of these statistics to you, but you can see that if, as we did a comparison from 2000 to 2016, the number of applicants to the Cal State has increased significantly. The number who have been admitted in terms of Latinos, again, we're talking just Latinos, has increased significantly, and those enrolled has increased, but not as significantly. And that is related to an issue we'll raise later in terms of solutions. What we do see at the Cal State is that, and I think I like to point this out because, you know, in California, one of the amazing things that we established in the 1960s was a broad and open access to higher education. Our leaders in 1960, through the Master Plan for Higher Education, said we need to send many more Californians to college. We are going to establish a free and affordable public university system. The UC, the CSU, and the community colleges grew significantly as a result. And the Cal State in particular was always envisioned as an open access university. While you do have to meet certain requirements like the A through G courses in high school to be admitted to the CSU, the idea was if you met that standard, you would be able to get in. The UC has a much more rigorous standard. It's a research institution. It's a competitive system. But the idea was that CSU would be fairly open access. I say that because we kind of take it for granted today that it is so hard to get into the CSU. And sometimes the response is, well, students should try harder. But what I want to remind folks is, while Diana is a easy admit into UCLA, she also actually shared that she took 10 AP courses and passed all her AP exams. So thankfully I can say I was an admit to a UC when I applied over 20 years ago, but I know for a fact that it's highly unlikely that I would get in today. And I think we need to have a conversation about whether that's acceptable or not. We sort of take it for granted, well, here's the bar, you know, and what happens when we don't fund our colleges and universities sufficiently, this is what happens. You have a UC system that keeps raising the bar for admitting students, a UCLA campus, of which I'm a proud Bruin, that has the most difficult, it is the most difficult campus to get into, one of. And now you have Cal State campuses that are incredibly impacted. An internal word that I don't like too much, but it's a word that they use to say, okay, we have more eligible applicants than we have spots for. So now we're going to declare these majors impacted at our campuses, and that means if you want to attend, if you want to be a psychology major, you are now going to have to meet a much higher bar. Now, is that bar necessary to be a psychology major? It's not necessary. It's necessary because I don't have enough space. And I have to have a process by which I weed people out. And so again, if we don't demand that our state leaders properly fund our universities, this will continue to get worse. And there are campuses right here, Fresno, Cal State Fullerton, Long Beach, San Diego, San Jose, San Luis Obispo, where all of their majors are impacted. And then there's campuses where almost all of them are impacted, including Cal State LA. Okay? Now, as a parent or a student, try figuring out, it's like figuring out, the trail. How do I get in? Which major should I apply to that might give me the best chance of getting in? Well, if I want to go to Long Beach, what do I do? What's the strategy? So we are making it harder and harder for students to get in today. And in fact, if we just look back in 2009, at the beginning of the recession, this is how many eligible students at the Cal State University were turned away. And at the University of California, obviously this is also a huge issue as we continue to raise the bar. And the top 6 campuses of the University of California are, places where it's nearly impossible for Latino and Black students to get in. 2/3 of them, in fact, were turned away. These campuses, a little more likely. I'm giving you a preview. On our website, you can actually find the full report called Access Denied that speaks just to this particular issue. And I want to tell you, I think this is really powerful because we don't speak to this as much, right? Latino applications at the UC, this is at UC Berkeley and UCLA, this is post Prop 209, the end of affirmative action. Latino applications up 350% in that time period. This is the percent of Latinos admitted, the increase. So I do make fun of the UC sometimes, and some of my UC friends tolerate me. But the UC is very proud of the growing number of Latinos at their campuses, and they should be. You saw the percentage earlier, but if we're talking about equity, it really should be closer in alignment to the number of Latinos in the state, right? And we have work to do to make sure that students are prepared. But I always say, when they get excited and talk about how there's more Latinos at their campuses, it's like the rooster taking credit for the sunrise. There's more Latinos applying, 350% more. There's more Latinos in California. Inevitably, there's going to be more Latinos at UC. That doesn't mean they're doing a good enough job. So you're probably asking, well, how many Latinos are ready for college? So we're going to talk a little bit about college preparation here and some of the hurdles, right, facing our community. So just so you know, only 9% of Latinos in 2014 attended the top 20% high-achieving high schools. So that means that 91% of Latinos in California are attending lower-achieving high schools. Only 3 in 10 Latinos have taken and passed the A through G curriculum required for admission to the UC and the CSU. And then once Latinos get to college, over 80% of them are placed in pre-college level courses. And that's also true for several other ethnic groups, as you can see here. But when we talk about solutions, you'll hear me address this as well. Just to give you a pictorial image of what it looks like in terms of the number of Latino students that are placed in remedial education, you could fill the Coliseum 1.5 times over. And my team loves to put USC there because they know it bothers me, but it's okay. So I just want to, as we approach kind of some of the last few data slides, give you a picture of where Latinos are in terms of college completion. So if you look at Latino students that enter community college, only 40% after 6 years complete a degree, certificate, or transfer. 6 years. How many of you thought that was a 2-year experience? And, you know, it's better, certainly at the University of California, but only half of Latinos are completing in 4 years. And these are the top performing students from high school. And at the Cal State, it's incredibly ridiculous at only 12% completing within 4 years. Just over half after 6. So obviously, our community faces a lot of barriers and challenges, a few of which I've already covered here. You know, some of them, and we pictured it this way, are things that students carry sort of before they even get to the college door, right? If you're low income, if you're first generation, you don't have a network of support to get you ready and through college. If you're attending a low performing school, as was cited earlier. And then when you get to the start line, so you're kind of carrying all this stuff, you're then thrown into pre-college level courses. Your chances of success are even further diminished. If that's the case, if the state doesn't provide sufficient funding, you probably don't have a chance to see a counselor. If you show up at a community college, the counselor ratio is 600 to 1. So what's the chance that you're going to actually sit down and talk to somebody and get the proper guidance to end up at the finish line, right? And then there's a broken transfer pathway, right, where students have to figure out a very complicated process for getting to the 4-year university if that's their goal. So now that I've properly depressed you all, I want to segue into, so what if, right? If we did things differently, if we were able to close the gaps. So this is really, if we close the gaps by race in California, this is what we would have. And I think this is more than just the personal story of, it's amazing that, you know, I got to go to college and the change that happened in my family because I got to go to college. But as a state, if we didn't have a racial gap in college going and completion, we would have more than 1 million more educated workers. We would increase our income in California by $135 billion. And you would have 790,000 more 4-year degrees. So it's pretty substantial what would happen. So as we kind of segue into the panel conversation, you know, we wanted to throw up a few things that we think are most important in terms of how we close the gaps. And I'm not going to get incredibly specific, but I do, beyond what you see here, these 9 points, I do want to share that, you know, we need state leaders to say that this is important to them and to identify a goal. In 1960, visionary state leaders said, we are going to have a master plan for education. Many of us in education think that somehow the master plan was like the Constitution of the United States, intended to last forever. And it was a 15-year plan. And so what I'm proposing is that our state leaders need to be thinking about what is the 15 or 10-year plan for California to address the challenges we face, and how are they going to fund them and pass policies to ensure that we get there. We have sort of included a wide range of recommendations because what I shared with you are a variety of challenges we face. There are the challenges of college preparation, and so we talk about how do we expand college knowledge in middle school and in high school. We've got to start talking to students now and to their parents about how do you even get to college? What do you have to do? We have to make sure that it's actually affordable for folks and that they know it's affordable. So I always say that, you know, the idea of going to college and accessing financial aid, that reality only exists if you know about it, right? If you have the perception that college is expensive and there's no money for you, then college is not anything real in your life. And so we have to make sure that that message is communicating. We have been strong advocates around pushing colleges to do a much better job and for our state to do a better job in terms of funding, in terms of the pathway, streamlining transfer. So we fought very hard in California and with the support of the legislature and the governor to pass the associate degree for transfer. That guarantees students a clear way in community college to earn a degree and to be eligible and guaranteed admission as juniors in the Cal State system. It is a growing pathway. It's becoming much more popular, but it isn't the preferred pathway yet. And so we need to do a lot more. And we also need to really be clear about holding colleges accountable. I hope every college is disaggregating their data by race and communicating what they're doing to close the gaps and to support student success. So you should ask your local college if they're doing that and how they can do that better. We support reinstating the use of affirmative action in higher education in line with the Supreme Court's decision to do so. I'm a proud beneficiary of affirmative action. I suspect many of us who are older in this room to have also been, and the reality is that whatever it takes to get more people of color educated in California is a good thing, and we should all be fighting for that. So these are, you know, just a few examples. I will stop because I think we're running a little bit late, but I hope this was helpful in terms of giving you a sense of what some of the big challenges that face our state look like and what we can do about it. I think we are very excited by the reality that more and more people are talking about college completion, that we're talking about improving transfer, that we are reforming remedial education. We have a bill in front of the governor now that will require community colleges to use high school GPA instead of the assessment test to place students. And part of that is because we are tired of seeing so many students inaccurately placed in remedial education without a way to get out of it. And so, since I have a captive audience, I will ask each and every one of you to call Governor Brown's office and to say that you support AB 705, because those are the kinds of reforms that we need to make sure happen, and your leadership in that space will be helpful. And Assemblymember Holden, thank you again for knowing how important this issue is and for being an advocate for us in Sacramento. And we look forward to continuing to work with you in partnership and with all of you here in the community. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you so much, Michelle, for being with us. Michelle's my boss, so I'm going to say really nice things. Wasn't she great? My name's Audrey Dow. I'm the Senior Vice President at the Campaign for College Opportunity, and really had the great fortune of meeting all of the panelists here tonight and working with them to put on this forum this evening. And so we're going to jump right in to our conversation this evening to talk a little bit about the data, but as Michelle shared, to talk about the solutions that are in front of us and what some of our local campuses are doing day in and day out to ensure that Latino students on their campuses are successful. So I want to just take a minute to introduce everyone on the panel. We have Dr. Micaela Mares Tamayo, who's the Director of Student Equity at Pasadena City College. Join me in welcoming her. Right here to my left is Dr. Cynthia Olivo, who's the Vice President of Student Services here at Pasadena City College. All-around superstar. We have Dr. Octavio Villalpando, who's the Vice Provost for Diversity and Engaged Learning Chief Diversity Officer for Academic and Student Life and a Professor of Education at Cal State Los Angeles. We have Dr. Beatriz Gonzalez, who's a Vice Provost and Chief Diversity Officer of the University of La Verne. Welcome. And one of my sisters in arms, Raquel Cimentel, who's the Director of External Relations and Communications at the Education Trust West. Thank you for being with us. So, Dr. Mares Tamayo, we're going to kick it off with you. What do our colleges and universities need to be aware of when a student is first generation, when they're low income, and they're potentially coming from an under-resourced high school? What do we need to be thinking about when those students walk in our doors?
And to answer that question, I really want to draw our attention back to point 7 that Michelle presented about improving institutional cultural competency. And so colleges and universities need to be aware that our first generation, low income, and potentially from under-resourced high school students come with high aspirations and limitless potential. So rather than viewing them from a lens that's focused on what they may quote-unquote lack, we need to recognize the strengths they bring and search for ways to build on them. And I think there's 3 ways that we really should be looking at our institutions to do that. The first is through professional development for faculty, staff, and administration, because there are specific pedagogical techniques and institutional policies that can be adopted to center students' experiences. And it basically boils down to not just assuming that all students are the same or automatically know what to do or when to do it. And if we flip that script a little bit, it will actually, by making those equitable shifts, actually serves all students better. So it's a win-win, right? The second point in terms of institutional commitment to supporting programs that share that kind of work, if you look at like UCLA, for example, the Center for Community College Partnerships at UCLA works relentlessly to deliver information to our students and communities in culturally affirming and sustaining ways, and builds upon the networks of support that exist within our students and within their families. Also, there's the first year experience under the leadership of Dr. Latanya Reese-Miles that's really working on this First to Go initiative that affirms first generation status as a good thing, right? Not as something to be ashamed of, but really as a key piece of that college experience. And then finally, I think institutions really need to, again, commit to developing those programs even further, like a CCCP or the First to Go initiative, but then also communicate with parents and families in meaningful ways, because our parents may not have formal education or advanced degrees, but really what they do not have is institutional knowledge. And that's very different than saying they're somehow uneducated or unable to support our students. And really, it should be the responsibility of the institutions to share that knowledge and ultimately build those bridges.
Thank you so much. Dr. Olivo, I'm going to go back a little bit on Michelle's slides here. I thought it was pretty striking looking at this picture of the Rose Bowl. with USC. I'm sorry, the Coliseum. Did I say Rose Bowl? The Coliseum.
I got
I
you,
was
Audrey.
thinking
Fight on.
UCLA. It's much more beautiful at the Coliseum. But, you know, the idea that we have so many students being placed into pre-college level courses where we know so few will ever make it through seems daunting.
Yes.
But I think there is a silver lining, especially here at PCC, about the ways in which that you're rethinking how you can get students ready and to be successful in college level math and English. So can you share with us a little bit about what you're doing?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So some of the practices we've engaged in over the past 2 years especially have been in including our faculty in professional development around cultural competence and adopting an equity-mindedness framework. What that means is that it's up to us as practitioners to change what we do. It's not requiring the students to do all of the changing. College in and of itself, through the learning process, provides that opportunity for students to change. However, we're also putting a lot of the onus on students to go out and identify information on their own. And so what we've done here at PCC is we've held retreats in partnership with USC, Center for Urban Education. And these have been retreats for the English faculty, math faculty, ESL, our 42 academic senators on our faculty senate group. And through these retreats, we have conversations about our data, and it's disaggregated by race and ethnicity. As one can imagine, these are not easy conversations to have. For example, our 6-year completion rate for our students at PCC is 55.4. 55.4% of our students who start 6 years ago. That is our overall completion rate. We are an Aspen top 10 college. For Latinos, it's 42.9%. There's still a lot more that we can do to improve, and we must do it. However, after we did the cultural competence and equity-mindedness training, we also brought in an external expert to speak about the value of what Michelle was discussing with AB 705, placing students based on high school grade point average rather than a test score. And we did that this year. We brought in an external expert. His name was John Hetz, and he conducted several presentations across 2 days. I had him present to faculty, staff, and administrators here, and we decided to adopt that method. As a result, several thousand African American and Latino students this fall started in college level courses. It is possible to change our practices, but it requires intention and a lot of hard work. And then also the willingness to continue changing. One, because we know that our students can succeed, and two, it's an economic imperative for our state. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Oliva. Dr. Villalpando, I'm going to go back to, again, another slide that we were looking at about representation in our segments and proportionality. And we see overall at the CSU that we have, that Latinos are 39% of the CSU population, but at your campus, they're 60%, right? And so you are definitely a Hispanic serving institution. I know that you're pulling from students in East Los Angeles and Central Los Angeles, who are often coming from those very schools that we're talking about that are severely under-resourced. They're low income, and they are first generation. But I think, again, we see that your campus is rising to the opportunities that are there. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you're doing?
Absolutely, absolutely. Let me also thank you and Assemblymember Holden for holding this very important forum. Cal State LA has a population, undergraduate population, about 78% of whom identify as first generation. So it's important to understand the population of students that we're working with. And they do come from schools primarily on the east side, although our service area extends up to Lancaster, past Palmdale. So it's very broad, but we tend to get mostly first-generation students. The university has also seen an incredible increase in applications. So we are also becoming a destination campus for many students in Southern California. Last year we received, for this current application cycle, over 55,000 applications. So when you compare that to the number of applications that UCLA receives, which is something like 150,000, right? And you sort of compare resources, we're looking at apples and oranges, which is why I appreciated the point that was made earlier. The issue is very complex. Institutions can do all that we can to ensure that every has an equal chance of succeeding, but without the resources from the legislature to do our job, given the changing demographics, it makes it especially difficult for campuses that have a student population that has not, for the most part, been well prepared for college. Okay? Now, when we look at the transfer students, for example, our two-year graduation rate for transfer students is close to 70%. Okay? So we are working very diligently to make sure that the campus is responding to how our student body has changed in general. Now, I can go through the same kinds of practices that my two colegas here on the left and on the right have just described in terms of cultural practices and faculty development and so forth. But I can also share with you that the recent decision by the California State University system to phase out entry-level exams that used to track students into remedial education and further delayed their graduation, is going to change our graduation rates in a very positive way. Okay? So it's important, I think, to just remember that Cal State LA is part of a large system of universities. Okay? And at every campus, we do the best that we can in serving the population of students that we can. I do want to make sure that one of the takeaways that you all have today for Cal State LA in particular is that we look like most institutions will look in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years, okay? We've already arrived at that point. And so the success that we're able to achieve with this student body should lend and provide some sort of potential best practices for students, because we are seeing successes. This last year, and I'll leave you with this final point, Cal State LA was identified as the #1 institution in the country for upward social mobility for students. So despite the challenges that our student body arrives with to the institution, okay, first generation and their families, with low-income families, okay, despite all those barriers, we managed to impact their education in such a way that they are more likely to go from the low 20th percentile to the upper 20th percentile in socioeconomic status. We are higher than private Ivy League universities. We propel students at a higher rate to upper levels of social mobility than private Ivy League students. What does that tell you about the investment that begins with certainly high schools and below, but also with our community college partners, and then what we're able to do for students at Cal State LA?
Thank you.
Dr. Gonzalez, you're at the University of Laverne, and when we looked at some of the numbers, especially at the UC and at the Cal State, and we think about limited state funding going to those institutions, there's a real role for our private nonprofits to play. How are you seeing your role in terms of picking up and creating access for more Latino students, and what are you doing around recruitment and retention?
Thank you very much, Audrey. Appreciate that. And thank you very much to Assemblymember Holden for having this forum and inviting the University of Laverne to be a case study about what privates can do to support Latino students. And you're right, given the capacity issues, we really have to look at private universities as partners with the public university so that Latino students do achieve an education. And let me for a moment tell you a little bit about the University of Laverne. When you hear private university, certain images come to mind. And while we are 126 years old and we do have some beautiful ivy-colored buildings, you may be surprised about our mission and our demographics and our program. So just a couple of facts about that. A few facts. 60% of our students are students of color, 50% of whom are Latino. Half of our students are the first in their families to attend college, and about half of them are Pell Grant eligible. So it's not Stanford, it's not USC. It's a different kind of place, and we take a lot of pride and dedicate ourselves to providing access to Latino students and other underrepresented students. So what are some of the things we've committed ourselves to, not only to provide access, but to really help them graduate and attain the success, and even beyond recruitment and financial aid? And I would say that the very first thing is the idea of intentionality. That sounds kind of fuzzy. Well, 3 years ago, we began a very intentional conversation and a sustained conversation about what it means to serve Latino students, not merely enroll them. And we launched that conversation at a State of the University address. And that was actually incredibly important because we were making explicit our intention. And there's something about saying something out loud. I'm in the field of counseling, and when you work with a client who wants to try a new goal or a new behavior, we often say to that person, tell it to someone else. Tell someone else what you plan to do. And even if you're not into counseling, if you've done a diet or exercise, they always say, tell somebody else, get a buddy, so that keeps you going. It increases your accountability. And the other thing about that, saying it out loud and say, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have this focused attention on what it means to serve our Latino students. It's a form of testifying. And there's weight to that. There's value to that, similar to when Sebastian talked about his professors, his teachers who helped him. He didn't say, I had these great teachers. He named his teacher by name. So there's something about saying something out loud and naming something that really matters. And for this conversation, we had 3 ground rules. And the first is, I'm sure Raquel will love this, it was going to be a data-driven experience. We weren't going to pull things out of our hat. We were going to look at the data. It was going to be disaggregated, and we're not going to guess. We're not going to presume. The second ground rule we gave ourselves, and we said this out loud at the State of the Community address, the University address, it's not a zero-sum game. So for Latinos to do well, other people don't have to do poorly. We just make a bigger pie, and that's absolutely possible. And so that's similar to these ideas of universal design. What might be good for Latino students, it's going to help everyone. And finally, the third ground rule was think systems. Sometimes when you talk about things like this, naturally conversations about diversifying the faculty and staff will enter that. And sometimes defensiveness comes up where an individual will say, but I'm a great teacher. Just because I'm not of the same ethnicity doesn't mean I don't care. Absolutely you are. It's not about you, though. We're talking about the system. So over the course of the 50 or 60 professors that a student is going to have, how many of them represent them, get them? So that was really important for us. Think systems, take it away from the individual piece. Because it was a sustained conversation, it became part of our strategic planning. And so for the last 3 years, the #1 strategic initiative out of 4 for academic and student affairs at our university is engaging our HSI identity. And that allowed us then to have measurable objectives about it. And not just the typical ones about graduation and retention, of course, but goals about diversifying our faculty and staff, about changing our curriculum, about developing the diversity competence of our people, and about the co-curriculum. So everything else a student sees, touches, experiences. And so just to give you a couple examples of all of these, because I'm trying to be as concrete as possible to be helpful. So in terms of diversifying our faculty and staff, we created a new search committee training program. It's 2.5 hours long. You cannot be on a faculty search committee unless you've participated participated in that training. And we talk about some real practical things. Besides expanding the pool, besides having real good behavioral-based questions about, give me examples of how you did that thing, we also talk about things like, oh, you have a candidate from Harvard, and you have a candidate from maybe a school you don't know as well. Typically, someone will say, oh, get the Harvard person. That's Harvard, crying out loud. Well, it is, and that's awesome, and that might be the best person. But maybe the Harvard person never was the advisor for a student group, never made time for students after class. So that's very, and just like publications, maybe someone has fewer publications because they were busy advising a student club, BSU, or something like that. And I'm very happy to say that after about a year of this program being in place, this fall, 52% of our faculty hires were underrepresented populations, Black and Latino faculty. So it is having an impact. In terms of the curriculum, we are launching our Latino Studies program this year. We should have had it a long time ago, but yay, we have it this year. And we're moving to having a required first-year course grounded in diversity and justice concepts. And we think that's really important so that everyone has a common language about what we're talking about. Everyone has a historical understanding of what we're talking about. And so remedial courses. We were fortunate to receive a Title III grant for STEM that allowed us to run a summer bridge program this summer in mathematics, 2 weeks on campus, residential for students. Every student went up by one placement in mathematics. A quarter of the students went up 2 placements in mathematics. So that means all the students who participated have shaved a year of college, have shaved a year off expensive college, because if not, they would have been in those remedial courses. So we're moving to eliminate remedial courses and instead do summer bridge, so shifting where our money goes. The diversity confidence of our faculty and staff. So we have 4 diversity town halls a year. We just had one last night on the intersection of the First Amendment and diversity and ethics. We have things like safe zone training and allyship training. But we also have regular faculty and staff development that people can count on, and that's how our programming will be this year. So every second Wednesday of the month, it will be diversity competence training, and all faculty and staff can go. So they know to count on it. Every Wednesday I can go and I can get some training on this. In terms of the co-curriculum, we launched a public art project because our students, we also have listening sessions with our students, so the provost and I meet with them during the academic year, and they gave us feedback that this is a beautiful campus, but it doesn't look like us. There aren't things here that represent us, that speak to our sensibilities of who we are. So we formed a University Arts Council for public art. A third of that council is students, so their voice is present. And I'm very happy to say that we are unveiling the first mural. So we've decided on a series of murals, 4 panels, and the first mural will be launched, will be unveiled officially at our homecoming. And it represents a beautiful Latina woman, and the title of the mural is "And Yet They Persisted." And in the end, we'll dedicate about $100,000 to that mural. And it is a big deal in the city of Laverne, and it wasn't all smooth, but we kept on with the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Raquel, I'm going to come to you next, and I'm going to go back on the slides one more time. Sometimes I think that the Campaign for College Opportunity has done a lot of reports on the state of higher education in California, where we're looking at race and ethnicity, and we show graphs like this, and we're not always the most popular with institutions or with other groups, that's for sure, and I think that Ed Trust West has often been in that boat as well. But data is important. And it shouldn't always be the outside advocates that are the ones shining light on the data. And we clearly have some best practices here at the table of institutions that are unafraid to look at their data as a starting point. But can you share a little bit with us about the importance of thinking about longitudinal data systems for the state and looking P through 20 if we're getting really serious about improving outcomes for Latinos?
Thank you, Audrey. And thank you, Assemblymember Holden and everyone for attending this very important conversation. I also want to start by thanking the educators and administrators in the room, both along this table and in the audience. And I also want to thank, I see Trio and folks with Puente shirts on, and these are the folks doing the hard work to really uplift our Latino students, making sure that they're getting to and through college. And they have the data to prove that it works. These are evidence-based practices, and I'm really excited to hear my colleagues to the right of me talking about how they are adapting to students and not expecting students to adapt to the system, but how can the system adapt to students and meet them where they are. In terms of using data to really tell the story, you know, data is a civil rights issue. And before I get too far into this conversation, I just want to acknowledge the context in which I'm talking about data and the data longitudinal systems, especially in our Latino community, and the fact that we're experiencing persecution, really. And when I talk about data and data systems, I want to make sure that I'm clear that I'm talking about data that is safe, data that is confidential of our students, and data that is going to be used to drive decisions and promote equity. And I just want to acknowledge that because our community has fear right now about the data that's being collected. So I just want to be clear that when I'm talking about these imported data systems that the state of California either needs to build or turn on and use to promote equity and to ensure that our Latino students are accessing higher education, I want to be clear about what that means. So we know that data is used to document inequities, and you know, Assemblymember Holden started us off about, you know, we're here to talk about what are those barriers, how we can remove those barriers, how the system is working or not working for Latino students, and you can't have that conversation if you don't have the data. And we know that data is used to, in other areas like housing and voting and employment, and so it's no different with education. Investing in longitudinal data systems that are going to tell us how students are faring, what are their access to good schools, fair funding, decent facilities, quality teachers, rigorous courses, everything that you need to be ready to enter the halls of higher education. So without a good data system, we also can't see and correct the inequities that exist that these students are experiencing. And without this longitudinal data and other data systems, right, my colleagues to the right can't make evidence-based decisions and improve the quality of education for California students. They have their own data, but imagine if we had created the links between you know, P-12 and post-secondary data systems so that we could track to see how well our public school system is preparing our students for college. And you know, 37 states have this longitudinal K-12 through college data systems, and 16 states track students from K-12 through the workforce, and California, sadly, is not one of them. You know, we can also, there's, Michelle talked about the disaggregation, and actually this is the slide that she was talking about, you know, disaggregating the data of educational attainment. But you'd also need to disaggregate this by gender. And that's something that California certainly does not do, is disaggregate student data by race and gender, because we know that these subpopulations experience schools in different ways. EdTrust West just released in June a report called Hear My Voice. It's a counter-narrative storytelling about young men of color and their accessing. It's creating the pipeline for college. And it really uplifts the voices of students about the barriers that they encounter through their eyes, through their voice. And in there, I encourage, if you're an institutional leader, either in the K-12 or post-secondary, are post-secondary best practices that some of these institutions that are serving a high number of young men of color are doing, so that more of them, and based on what the data that we saw today, how we need to make sure that our Latino students, especially Latino young men of color, who have degree attainment disproportionately lower than female Latinas, or Latinas, Latinx, actually. So that in itself right there is a conversation starter as well. So I leave you with that. And I think in the K-12 system, if you're, an administrator in the K-12 space, also a longitudinal data system to track teachers. Where are our qualified teachers? Are they being are they teaching in disproportionately under-resourced schools? And also collecting data on the experiences of students, parents, and teachers. So, right, we don't have a data system that talks about how are the school climate, parent engagement, and teacher working conditions as well. But in post-secondary education, building a longitudinal data system that connects both B12 and post-secondary data systems would be very, very useful.
Thank you, Raquel.
So we have about 10 minutes before we ask the audience for questions, so I hope that you're starting to think about what you would like to ask some of the individuals here on the panel. But I do want to use the last 10 minutes of just this panel to talk a little bit about the recommendations that Michelle presented, that the committee also had a hand in drafting. And I'm going to not pick on anyone in particular. I'm going to put them back up here on the screen. No, one more back. So we have 9 recommendations here, everything from a new statewide plan, aligning P20 data systems, doing away with affirmative action, improving institutional cultural competency, and, to Dr. Gonzalez's point, hire to reflect the diversity of the student body. What do you think about these recommendations? And if you were someone here in the local district wanting to really see a policy or practice implemented to make a difference, what would you be recommending? And just grab the mic. Anybody?
I would say equal employment opportunity training is something very easy that each institution can fix. For example, here at PCC, we used to have an outside firm from a lawyer company come in and conduct the EEO training, which was very basic. And 2 years ago, we switched to a different model to bring in an expert on cultural competence. Her name is Dr. Chris Cullinan, and we had a group from the Pasadena City College Safe Zone Coalition who identified her at the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity. And now Dr. Cullinan conducts all of our equal employment opportunity trainings at PCC. We did see a difference because she trains committee members on how to identify cultural competence in candidates. That is something easy that institutions can fix, to go beyond just the compliance-based EEO training from a legal perspective and go really deeply into what is it to be culturally competent, and how do you identify cultural competence in materials from candidates?
Dr. Villalpando?
I think probably the single most important recommendation that College Opportunity, Campaign for College Opportunity has come up with is the possibility of rescinding Prop 209. Because that proposition has had among the most far-reaching negative effects in post-secondary education, in the history of post-secondary education in the state of California. Because it has caused us to think about practices that are allegedly raceless or race-blind or race-neutral, which is an impossible task to follow. And so it requires us to sort of contort ourselves in all sorts of directions to try to meet the spirit of the law. Certainly, the legal implications of not doing that is very important. But it also has driven underground the conversation about discrimination that continues to exist in our society. So to me, once we approach the existence of Proposition 209 and its negative effects that has now been close to, we're going on 2 generations now of losing students. Once we approach that openly as a state, we're talking about a very different approach to post-secondary education. One that probably is much more economical, by the way, because then we don't have to talk about particular services for a community that is, where the services are devoid of race, okay, allegedly, or additional resources to try to enhance the success of other communities that would be displaced otherwise if it weren't for the fact that we try to be race blind. So it just makes absolutely no sense in this day and age to continue to hold on to this notion of a race-blind society, given the population of the state of California in particular.
I want to, this is Raquel, the Education Trust West, in addition to, championing the need for data, so I'll get off that soapbox, and I'll move on to number 5, strengthening financial aid support. At Trust West actually has a financial aid tracker you can access via our website that shares the FAFSA rates of high schools and districts. And we think that conversation, of college affordability is a very important one for Latinos right now to have. Our upcoming report, which is titled The Majority Report, Uplifting the Success of Our Latino Students in California. We'll be releasing that report in mid-October, and if you'd like to make sure that you get an electronic copy of the report, you can go to themajorityreport.org and enter your email, and you'll be one of the first to receive it. We talk about how needing, from the state policy level, providing more financial support for low-income students to attend colleges, and how increasing the Cal Grants awards is certainly a piece of that for our students, but also working with counselors in high schools, encouraging them to, we champion AB 2160, which is legislation that made it mandatory, although we're having actually challenges in the implementation of this law of having high schools upload the data, the GPA verification for students straight to the California Student Aid Commission, right? And thus removing a barrier of putting the onus on the student to have to do that, right? How can the system, again, support our students and promote equity? So we really believe that the financial aid piece is a very important conversation for Latino students. We know that's a barrier to access oftentimes higher education. I know as a first-generation college student myself, my parents are like, college is fine, but we don't have any money. So, if you could figure out, because my parents are immigrants, how to pay for college, then great. But if not, we can't take out a loan. We can't mortgage the house. So those are some real conversations that our Latino families are having. So an emphasis on college affordability, I think, is another big piece of this conversation. Is there anyone else?
And again, thank you to everyone who came this evening, and I would highly encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to please sign in on the table that's in the back corner right there, because we do have space for either your email or phone number, because that way we can send out information to you all, because there were a lot of great resources mentioned this evening. And I think on that note, I would encourage us to think about how we then take this information and share it with people who weren't here. Because if you look around, there are some amazing colegas, their colleagues, their community members, administrators, teachers who are here, and then there are some who are not. That's my son. My son is here, so thank you to him and my family for that. And being someone who's from Pasadena, very proudly born and raised here, this is pretty historic, because this is one of the very first events, if not the only event of this kind that we've had. So I do thank Assemblyman Holden's office for that. At the same time, at the same time, there are many other folks who need to be a part of this conversation. So it means going back to our schools, to our community members, to our people and saying, how are we expanding college knowledge in middle and high school? And how are we doing that not just for certain students in a certain, area of the campus or in certain classes, but how are we really doing that for all of our students and for all of our family members to get invited into that conversation? So I think that's very important for us to keep in mind as well.
Thank you, Adrienne. Two things first. You reminded us about having representation in faculty and staff that look like our students, which is super important for those underrepresented students, but just as important for white students to hear a divergent point of view and to know that a Latino faculty member, a black faculty member, yeah, that Latino is a rocket scientist, or that person is a chemist or an artist. That's just as important for white students as it is for underrepresented students. But I actually wanted to say something related to what Octavio was talking about. And so often the idea is, what's scalable? What best practice can we take and apply over to another place? And this conversation, a few of us started after a meeting of HSI educators last week on our campus. And the few of us were talking about, but is that really efficacious? Can that work in a predominantly white institution? Something that was a predominantly white institution that now the students have changed, and yet the underlying foundation of that institution is still predominantly white. Its ethos is still like that. Have you looked at all the policies? Have you looked at the practices, meaning the stuff that isn't written down, the stuff, the coded stuff, the stuff that isn't in policy? So I think a best practice will never work in another context like that if we don't take time for that kind of reflection. Anyway, and those are the insidious things that happen that keep people from advancing, that keep us from diversifying faculty, that promote us to implement admissions practices that are unfair and heavily reliant on standardized testing. So that was a point of agreement. Thank you.
So I know Faith Lee is in the audience. Faith is with Assemblymember Holden's office and really has been the one spearheading this entire event. So thank you, Faith, for everything you did. But I want you to take notes on this very quickly because I want to sum up what the folks up here said about the recommendations. First, it's clear that a conversation needs to be continued in the region around Latino student success. We heard a lot about the need for there to be open, transparent, and actionable data. We heard from Raquel the importance of ensuring college is affordable and that students know what financial aid is available to them so that we're not leaving money on the table. We heard a lot about access and overturning Proposition 209, but also within that, how do we work within the confines of Prop 209 until it is overturned to ensure that students really do have access? And then a lot of conversation around the need for cultural competency, the need to rethink this, as Dr. Gonzalez said so clearly, the ethos that's underlying our institutions that is what needs to change. And so how can we have conversations about how, as a region, we make some new commitments to how our institutions operate. So that was fantastic panel. You guys are amazing. We're going to take the next 20 minutes or so to hear from you. There is, I think, a handheld mic going around or available here in the middle. I think we're going till 7:30, Faith, is that right, on Q&A? Yes, okay. So if you come up and you have a question for the panel, let us know who you're asking the question to. State your name, your affiliation, and if we could keep it to a question, a very specific question, and not just general comments, that would be helpful. And as you get up the nerve to come in line, I will throw out another question, but unless I see someone biting at the bit. Come on up, come on up.
hello. My name is Alejandra. I'm Sebastian's mother. I'm the RN that graduated from Pasadena City College. I didn't say that to get a clap. But my question is in regards to accountability. And Dr. Octavio, you already have a proven kind of a plan that works for Latinos. However, my son and my daughter both attend Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, where Latinos are underrepresented. And I find that every single time I speak with my son, he tells me, oh, such and such dropped. And it happens to be a Latino in the STEM program. So my question is, how can you take your proven plan for Latino retention into all of these underrepresented colleges?
Thank you. Thanks for your question. So I think there are two parts to, or two potential responses to your question. One, it goes back to Prop 209. You see, part of what that has created for us is a need to veil our conversations about culturally based practices, right, as racially neutral practices, so that we don't expose the institution to unnecessary legal challenges or unfounded legal challenges. So some campuses are in a position where they're willing to take those risks and push those boundaries, which, by the way, is one of our taglines at Cal State LA, pushing boundaries, to the point where they understand that sound, culturally, racially informed practices have been proven by the research over the last 50 years to be effective in helping students graduate. That's the argument that we make at Cal State LA. We know that the data supports our practices. We wouldn't be doing them otherwise. I will add that we've just introduced actually it came from the president and from the faculty together, a proposal to create our first college in many, many years focused on race and ethnicity and social justice. Okay, that'll house our ethnic studies departments, gender and sexuality, and so forth. Okay, this is unusual, and the faculty at Cal State LA recognize that this isn't the creation of such a college isn't a PR proposition. It's an educational imperative because it serves as a beacon to other campuses, right, and to other communities and families that our campus understands who we are charged to serve. Okay? And without having that sort of clear view about the fact that we have to serve this community that is so underserved across post-secondary education, we're not going to succeed. We're not going to succeed. So part of it, I think, is also, I will also add one final thought. The Cal State system has launched a very aggressive plan to hire more chief diversity officers at every institution. Okay? And chief diversity officers look differently at every institution, not the way we look, but just in terms of our scope of work. Okay? But one of the most important things that we know we need to do is to begin to change the way by which we think about student success for diverse communities. Okay? Very, very important. And to introduce the idea that our students that come from Latino identities especially, have to be recognized as holders of knowledge, as creators of knowledge, and as asset-based students that are going to improve our institution. Okay? So we take that notion of cultural deficiency and turn it upside down, and realizing that that doesn't fit the experience that we have with our students at Cal State LA.
Any other questions for the panel? Come on up.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Mariana de la Torre. I have 3 daughters two graduated from Marshall Fundamental, and one is currently in Marshall in the Puente program. So my question to Assemblyman Holden, excuse me, I'm a little nervous, is our Puente program was cut the funds from the state this year, and luckily the district of Pasadena continued to support the program for the next 4 years. But how can we prevent this from happening again? What if in the next 4 years, the district doesn't want to fund Puente? How can we take it back to the state for them to continue to fund this program? And this relates to number 4. The Puente program gives the students the information, the knowledge about colleges, universities. It opens their awareness to all that. So how can we do that?
Well, thank you for the question. First of all, I support the Puente program. My boys, when they were at Pasadena High School, were in the program for a period of time, and so it was really an asset for children of all races and backgrounds. And I know that with the local control funding formula, the idea was really to create an opportunity for school districts to put the amounts of money in the areas that they would like to see it go. But I will say that where there's an opportunity, and we'll take a look at the budget for next year, where we can maybe send a message to, and this would be helpful through this process. The governor will be presenting his State of the State message in January, to be followed by a presentation of his budget for the ensuing year. And in that budget, we'll highlight sort of directions and priorities that he would see to be important. The process then unfolds where the legislature on both houses works through the budget process, budget committees. And so I would say if you could send me a letter to highlight the program, we can then inquire about that. I'll make notes tonight, but we will inquire about it and make if the governor is not funding it at an appropriate level, then we can certainly make a recommendation on additional funds that we think need to go into the program. But it would be helpful to get as clear direction at the local level as we can, so we can be very helpful when we get to the budget process. But I do think it's also important for us to start, for me and others, to ask questions about the local control funding formula process and how the funding is being aligned with programs that the community is really high on. And that's what should be happening as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I think one of the things that has been on a lot of people's minds are, the uncertainty around DACA students. And, there are students likely that folks in the audience are working with that are possibly transitioning into college, or some that are already in college. What's some of the advice, and where are some of the places students can go to get information that they need and maybe feel like they've armed themselves with the best information that they can for what is really an uncertain time?
So thank you for that question, Audrey. And I think that if we look at PCC, for example, there's a lot of really dedicated people who have been working really hard to celebrate and to also support our undocumented, and specifically our students who are currently receiving DACA and are in a very tenuous position now of losing that. And I do want to acknowledge them in the audience today. So we have Javi, Yahaira, and James, who are part of our Safe Zones Coalition. If they could just kind of wave their hands real quick. And with, of course, it helps to have the administrative support through Dr. Olivo and many other folks here on campus. But I think to answer the question, really, we need to understand that what's happened with the rescission of DACA, or the taking away of DACA, is something that does not just impact a small group of students. The number for LA County now is about 55% of youth who live in a mixed status family, meaning that they may be a citizen themselves, but a sibling or a parent is undocumented, or or could be receiving DACA or not, or TPS, right, which is another important issue to be aware of, that provides some form of protection currently for our students of Central American background. but is also very much in a tenuous position with a January 1st sort of key date coming up. That having been said, our counselors, our teachers, our school administrators need to know exactly what's going on. There's misinformation out there in the sense of a lot of the focus of the press conference from September 5th was that, oh, DACA will be in place for 6 months. And that's not true. Because really what it is that those who currently have DACA, if their DACA expires within the next 6 months up to March 5th, they can renew it. However, that renewal has to be submitted with a $495 application fee by October 5th. And so that information is missing in, the kind of the one-liners or the headliners that we see. So we need to understand that. We need to understand all the resources that are available. There's amazing community-based organizations. Educators for Fair Consideration is an amazing one. The website weareheretostay.org has a fabulous resources section, so I highly encourage people to look through that, and it's in multiple languages, a lot of their resources there. And so I think we definitely need to be aware of where those resources are, getting them out to folks, and really looking at kind of the model that LAUSD has set forth, where LAUSD has like a handbook that's full of resources and support for undocumented students to really show that there's that commitment and there is that promise to serve all students regardless of citizenship status. And really all of our districts should have that, all of our colleges should have that, and there are really good organizations within colleges like Safe Zone Centers or Undocumented Student Resource Centers that we need to be familiar with, need to know the people who are working there, and find ways to be allies outside of those institutions as well.
We also have a PCC Facebook page called United Without Boundaries, and it's maintained with all of the DACA renewal clinic information that is happening in Los Angeles, and I would encourage you to please let students know, counselors, teachers, everyone that can spread this news. And I just want to, thank Micaela. I hired her in just a few months ago, and now she is the supervisor over the Safe Zone Center, which will open in middle of December. And you can see we're in very good hands.
I just want to quickly mention that on the kind of state policy level, the advocacy that Ed Trust West, along with others like the Campaign for College Opportunity, are supporting AB 699. Thank you, Assemblymember Holden, for voting for AB 699, which provides protections for students, for undocumented students and their families, and limits the interaction of ICE on public school sites. That's K-12 and public universities. And also SB 54 is, I think both of these bills are on the governor's desk. And then, we should applaud, right, California's efforts. We've got the California DREAM Act, AB 540 students, and we have to continue our advocacy. How do we expand, how do we strengthen that program now more than ever? And so, make sure that you're engaging in the state policy process as well, because that's going to ensure uniformity in protecting all our students, because we know that if we try to do this county by county, school district by school district, it's not going to be implemented uniformly. So it needs to be state policy to ensure that we are protecting all of our students no matter where you live.
I know that there are also a number of scholarships that are available for individuals who need support covering the $495 application fee. The Mission Asset Fund that is out of San Francisco is the recipient of philanthropy foundations coming together to support those fees. So if you go to missionassetfund.org, I think it's MAF.org, there's a clear way on how you can access those resources. And I think, Alfred, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Alfred Novena at UCLA. I wanted to also talk about Cheerla having all of these different workshops and doing them for free. free for students and families, but also I want to applaud the president of the University of California for her stand on undocumented students, particularly in funding $8 million over the last 3 years, or 3 years to come, on services. So all of our campuses have centers on at each of our campuses with a director and support for students. In addition, we have a legal services center. So any UC student, so if you're enrolled at a UC, you can get legal services for you or your family, regardless of the situation. So we want to make sure that all students know that, because we have a lot of students that have mixed families where the student might be documented, but the parents are not. They can actually get services for those parents to help them with the process and so on and so forth. And in addition, I want to make sure that we don't focus only on DACA, because there are so many of our students that do not qualify for DACA, and we can't forget how important it is to include them in this discussion around undocumented student services and access to resources. And then also that we're doing a lot of fundraising to pay the fees, and I know that the University of California has partnered with several different organizations to fund the fees for the students. So if you know any UC students, you can get a hold of us as well, and we are trying to advocate for them for that as well.
Thank you so much. I think we're right at 7:30, so with that, we'll wrap up the panel. Thank you again, everyone, for being with us this evening and having a productive dialogue.
Have any questions in the back?
Yeah, I'd like to, we just have a few more comments to share with you and to make a quick presentation. So before you leave, first again, let's just again thank our panel, and let's thank Audrey for her being the moderator and doing a fantastic job at that. We thank Michelle from Campaign for College Opportunities for helping to shape and form the discussion for this evening. It's very important. I think you've heard a sort of an important give and take and sharing of information and knowledge that we need to connect to, and so we appreciate that. You know, there's also some other people who are part of this community who have really done their part to make a difference in terms of uplifting the opportunity for Latino students to be the best that they can be. And our planning committee for this forum thought it would be a good idea, and I thought it was a good idea as well, to recognize a couple of community-based organizations where the people that were part of those organizations have been serving in a dedicated way to address the needs of our young people. They are champions in education, and in the 41st District, I'm pleased to present a certificate of recognition to these incredible organizations. The Community Leadership Award goes to Adelante Youth Alliance. Okay, I take it you've heard of them. They have provided, it's an organization based in Pasadena that provides academic, professional, and leadership development for our youth. Since its inception, over 1,700 youth have been involved in Adelante's core youth supporting programs, and another 23,000, is that right? 23,000, wow. 23,000 in Adelante's 2 annual youth-focused college, career, and personal development conferences. Adelante Mujer Latina and Adelante Young Men. I would like to invite Stella Murga, Executive Director of Adelante, to come up and accept this certificate.
Thank you so much. This is such an honor. And I want to thank Assemblyman Holden, who has been a champion of ours for a number of years now and a champion of youth, especially underserved youth. His office has been very supportive over the years, and we know we can always rely on him. We also want to thank PCC. This is like my second office, so I know it like the back of my hand. And all of the PCC professionals, Melva Alvarez, who's a partner at Madison with us, the TRIO program, I mean, so many, Dr. Olivo, PCC has been a tremendous partner, hosting our conferences for 23 years now. So every year, now we're here twice a year, so well, I can't thank you enough. And I received this on behalf of my very dedicated staff, Jose Madera, Christian Madera. And of course, we have a number of successful professionals here who volunteer for our conferences, and this really belongs to them. There, please wave your hand. So, and my husband as well. So Adelante Youth Alliance is really the vehicle by which they share their tips, their college and career journeys with thousands of middle and high school Latinos and Latinas. And, you know, hearing this information, it just makes us want to do more and ensure that our young people get the information they need to be successful. Thank you so much.
Our next award or certificate, we'd like to congratulate the University of Laverne for being chosen for the Institutional Leadership Award. The University... The University of Laverne has made conscious effort to move in the direction of meeting the needs of our diverse community by implementing a campus-wide university strategic plan on diversity. The university also has a very successful Center for Multicultural Services dedicated to fostering an environment of exploration and empowerment of the diverse cultural communities. I would like to invite Dr. Beatriz Gonzalez to come forward and accept this certificate.
I'm honored to accept this on behalf of the University of Laverne, not the University of Awards. That would be something. And I also want to acknowledge all my colleagues here from the University of Laverne. These are the folks doing all the heavy lifting, making all of that happen. So thank you all very much.
One of the colleagues from University of Laverne is a PCC alumni. I see her in the audience.
Speaking of being an alumnus of a particular university, this young man over here, I'd like to have him stand up. He's got a gray sweatshirt on. You can stand up. You know I'm talking to you. Okay. It says San Diego State University. That's my school. Okay, both of you. All right. SDSU, Aztecs in the house. We're going to wrap up, and again, I want to thank all of you for being here. I think that what we were hearing underscores some of the issues that we know that are out there, and even though we didn't focus on STEM education, I know that many of you are very aware of how by 2025 we're going to be 1 million degrees short in the STEM field. And so whatever we can continue to do, especially for our communities of color, that it's very important, because as we engage with the Silicon Valley and the tech companies, they are recognizing and they are looking for young people who can come out and be able to fit the jobs that are being created. And so I think it's very important that we continue to focus on the science, technology, engineering, and math subjects, because that's where the jobs are going to be, certainly here in California. And I also want to highlight the fact that one of the barriers that we're finding and agreeing with is that 209 has done great damage to creating opportunities for people of color to be able to matriculate to the higher educational system. And, you know, let's just, I'll be very, very candid. There is an and very high degree of appetite amongst my colleagues to go back and take another look at this. We were going to do it a couple of years ago. The timing didn't seem to be right for one reason or another, but I think it is very critical that we get our arms around this issue, that we go back to the voters. And let me just underscore, elections matter, right? Elections matter because look what happened here in 2009, but also look what's happening in current terms. You know, so we had to pass a resolution to challenge the president on his statements around DACA students. And as a legislative body in the state, California, in the United States of America, to have to take your leader to task, there's something wrong with that. But it needed to be done. And we did it, and we're going to stand behind making sure that our students are protected. Let me also just make one quick point. The legislature has been pressing very hard for some time now, and I think the UCs and CSUs have been responsive to making sure that this great university system that was created here in California, that it is also going to serve our young people who live in California. And we've seen over many years a lot of out-of-state students, a lot of out-of-the-country students who are coming to California and getting a great education in our UC, CSU system. That's okay, but not to the extent that it freezes out our kids. So we've been pushing back on that as well. And so just in conclusion, let me just say that there's a lot of work to be done. And the fact that this is, when we did the Black Minds Matter hearing a year or so ago, it was the first time that had been done. And so here we are addressing the needs of our Latino youth, and this is the first time an event like this has taken place. So we have to make sure that what comes out of these conversations, that we can really start to put them into effect, that we can really start to change the system and start to make sure that it is truly working for our young people, because the state is becoming increasingly diverse. It's already majority minority, and that means the rest of this country by 2050 is going to be majority minority. So what are we doing today to prepare for a very diverse and aggressive workforce? And what we're talking about today puts the wheels in motion and keeps us moving in that direction. So again, thank you for coming out. Let me thank my staff, Faith Lee. Let me also thank Hector Rodriguez in the very back. You guys, great job. And let me also just recognize Dr. Leva, because she was with us with this from the very beginning. She came to us with some great ideas of how this could come together. And so I really do want to single her out for her great leadership and helping to make tonight happen. So thanks for coming out and have a great evening. It looks like we got food in the back, so enjoy.
El portal in the back.